let's just jump right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are looking at one of the most stunning, absolutely catastrophic sequence of events in modern history. We're going to unpack exactly how post-World War I treaties accidentally created this perfect breeding ground for dictators. We'll see how diplomatic failures practically rolled out the red carpet for their aggression, and how a really stubborn reliance on outdated military tactics led to the shockingly fast fall of France. It's this massive historical domino effect, and it fundamentally shows us why understanding diplomacy and deterrence is just as crucial today. So, to make sense of this global shift, we are going to trace the events through 5 parts. 1. The rise of fascism. 2. Germany rejects Versailles. 3. The policy of appeasement. 4. Stagnation and the phony war. And finally, 5. Blitzkrieg and falling France. Chapter 1. The rise of fascism. From socialism to dictatorship. We have to start with Italy. After World War I, Italy was technically on the winning side, but they were bitter. The economy was a mess, the government was weak, and honestly, it was the perfect stage for Benito Mussolini. Now, Mussolini had actually been a pretty prominent anti-war socialist, but when he realized the war could spark a revolution, he completely flipped and became aggressively pro-war. After getting kicked out by his fellow socialists, he created something brand new. Fascismo. Instead of dividing people by class, this ideology demanded extreme unity through nationality. It was driven by this grand militant dream to basically conquer the Mediterranean and bring back the glory days of the Roman Empire. Mussolini's pivot was incredibly fast. He goes from being an arrested socialist agitator in Switzerland in 1902 to a pro-war militant to literally marching up to the King of Italy in 1922 and saying, "Make me prime minister or I'll make me prime minister." And backed by his fascist supporters, it actually worked. He established a dictatorship right then and there, making himself Europe's very first fascist dictator. Chapter 2. Germany rejects Versailles. Humiliation and rearmament. So over in Germany, things were even more volatile. The absolute crushing humiliation of their World War I defeat was cemented by the Treaty of Versailles. And this treaty absolutely wrecked Germany. We're talking massive loss of territory, a completely demilitarized Rhineland, their army capped at just 100,000 men, which is basically nothing for a nation that size, a total ban on an air force, and these massive financial payouts that they literally just couldn't afford. It left a desperate, super angry population essentially begging for a savior to restore their national pride. And Adolf Hitler perfectly exploited that anger. He had been a wildly patriotic soldier during the First World War, and nobody was madder about Germany's humiliation than him. Now, he actually failed at first. He was arrested after a botched uprising in Munich in 1923. But he bounced back, growing his popularity tremendously until by 1933, the president actually appointed him chancellor. He instantly went full megalomaniac, setting up Europe's second major fascist dictatorship. Hitler immediately got to work tearing up the Treaty of Versailles, step by step. First, he sets up the Luftwaffe, the Air Force, which was completely illegal. Then, he introduces forced conscription to bulk up his tiny army. Finally, he marches that new army right back into the demilitarized Rhineland. And the wildest part of all this, the Allies did absolutely nothing to stop him. It is such a stark historical reminder of how unchecked aggression early on just emboldens future conflict. Chapter 3. The policy of appeasement. Diplomatic failures. Right, so with a re-strengthened military, Hitler starts looking for Lebensraum, or living space, to expand the Aryan population. That meant taking over his neighbors, which finally made the Allies nervous enough to react. But instead of pushing back with force, they used this deeply flawed diplomatic strategy: appeasement. Essentially, Hitler would say, "Hey, I want that territory," and the Allies would say, "Okay, fine, you can have it, but you have to promise not to ask for anything else." They just handed him whatever he wanted to avoid starting another war. This delusion totally peaked when Hitler demanded the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. The Allies held a big meeting in Munich, a meeting, by the way, that Hitler wouldn't even let Czechoslovakia attend. They just gave him the land in exchange for a signature on a piece of paper. The British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain actually flew home waving that paper, proudly announcing to everyone that the crisis was averted and they had secured the continuation of world peace. Yeah, about that. Hitler just ignored his signature and immediately invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia anyway. The whole policy of appeasement was just a complete and utter failure. As it turns out, you can't ask a dictator what the catch is, get a promise, and actually expect them to keep it. At this point, the dominoes are falling fast on a global scale.
Italy doesn't want to be left out, so they occupy Albania to control the Adriatic. Japan is aggressively invading China, committing horrendous atrocities in Nanking. Germany and Italy make their alliance official with the Pact of Steel. And then, the real stunner. Hitler makes a cynical non-aggression pact with Stalin to split Poland. On September 1st, 1939, German troops crossed into Poland. And that was it. Britain and France finally had to put their foot down and declare war.
Chapter 4. Stagnation and the Phony War. Reluctance to fight. You would think a declaration of war would mean immediate, massive battles, right? Nope. Instead, we got this bizarre period known as the Phony War. While Germany was relentlessly modernizing this massive war machine, the French were kind of stuck in the past. They were way too proud of their World War I victory. They were literally still relying on horses and motorbike messengers. They issued these vague orders, and this is unbelievable. They wouldn't launch artillery strikes against Germany because they were afraid of retaliation. They declared war, but they didn't actually want to attack. And the British? They were just as hesitant. Chamberlain was still clinging to these naive hopes for a diplomatic fix. Instead of dropping bombs on Germany, the Royal Air Force was dropping propaganda leaflets. One air marshal even joked that they were just giving the enemy free toilet paper. They only sent about 200,000 men to back up millions of mobilized French troops. After a really messy, failed attempt to keep the fighting far away in Norway, Chamberlain finally resigned and Winston Churchill stepped in as prime minister.
Chapter 5. Blitzkrieg and Falling France. The Dominoes Crash. So all that stagnation and reluctance to fight during the Phony War, it handed Hitler exactly what he needed. Time. Time to prepare his ultimate strike. His grand strategy was actually pretty straightforward, really similar to Germany's goals in World War I. Step 1, attack and defeat France, hopefully knocking the UK out in the process. Step 2, turn on the Soviet Union and win the whole thing. But this time, Hitler had a totally devastating new trick up his sleeve to guarantee Step 1.
That trick was Blitzkrieg, lightning war. As the Allies rushed head-on into Belgium to meet the German invasion, basically expecting a repeat of WWI, Hitler completely outsmarted them. He pushed thousands of refugees west to clog up the roads and slow the Allies down. Then he unleashed the Blitzkrieg. He smashed 50 Wehrmacht divisions straight through the Ardennes forest, this dense area to the south that the French had left dangerously underdefended because they just assumed it was naturally impenetrable. And that single colossal tactical mistake caused the dominoes to crash so fast. The best Allied armies were suddenly entirely encircled. It led to that desperate, chaotic escape at Dunkirk, where everyday British civilian ships had to sail across the channel just to rescue their trapped troops. With the French forces completely depleted, the Germans basically just breezed through, took Paris, and France officially fell.
Hitler had managed to accomplish in mere weeks what Germany couldn't do in the entire 4 years of World War I. And that leaves us with this huge, chilling question. With France fallen, Italy joining the fight, and Britain standing completely alone against a totally unstoppable war machine, how could an isolated UK possibly survive the onslaught that was coming next? Think on that for a bit, because the sheer resilience required for the next chapter is just mind-blowing. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this helped connect the dots for you, and keep learning.